Today's the day. We are going to start working on your takeoff and landings. And just around the corner is your solo flight. So are you ready to finally earn your wings? Let's do this. This is Navigraph Academy, where we teach you real-life flying techniques inside our most modern home flight simulators. We are going to begin by looking at the takeoff and landing segments specifically. And in the next lesson, we will focus on the traffic pattern profile. First, we'll start by reviewing the takeoff sequence, covering key skills like centerline keeping and rotation techniques. And we will also discuss climb-out speeds and proper nose attitudes after takeoff, as well as introducing the checklist items during the climb. Once we're comfortable with the departure procedures, we'll move on to the landings. Here we'll explain the Cessna's behavior on the final approach, how to manage the airspeed and the glide path, and then we'll focus on the flare and the landing techniques, especially the nose attitude and the centerline control. Finally, we'll cover go-rounds, emphasizing their importance in safely aborting landings when airspeed or glide path are not properly maintained. The goal here is to get you fully confident with accurate and safe takeoff and landings in preparation for your upcoming solo flight. So are you ready to dive in? Let's go. Looking at this aircraft here, it is standing still on the runway, and we can visualize the path it will take as it accelerates and takes off. Let us zoom out for a better view. All takeoffs can be divided into 4 distinct segments. Let us now study each of these segments in detail. First, we have the ground acceleration segment. In this part of the takeoff sequence, the aircraft is building up speed, and the goal is to achieve enough lifting force to overcome the weight of the aircraft and lift off. As the aircraft reaches the airspeed required for liftoff, the nose needs to be raised to achieve a large enough angle of attack to achieve the required lifting force. This pitch-up segment is called the rotation segment, as it involves rotating the aircraft to a liftoff attitude. As soon as the aircraft becomes airborne, we are in the initial climb segment. Here, the airspeed is low and the nose attitude is relatively high. The goal of this segment is to pitch down slightly to allow the aircraft to accelerate to the desired climb speed. Soon, the airspeed approaches the final climb speed, which is usually the speed for best rate of climb, and it is now possible to pitch up again. We have arrived at the final climb segment, and we can now focus on maintaining our climb speed, our course, and do that until we reach a safe altitude. At that point, we are free to turn, complete checklist, and perform other actions. Let us now look at each of these 4 segments one by one, focusing on the airplane and how it behaves and reacts in each of them separately. First, consider this aircraft that has just lined up on the runway. It is aligned on the center line of the runway, and the power is at a stable 1000 RPM. The pilot is holding position with the brakes, and the goal is now to accelerate the aircraft up to rotation speed. This rotation speed is given in the aircraft's operating handbook. For the Cessna 172, it is 55 knots. Thus, as we begin our takeoff, we smoothly apply full power. And as we do, we'll experience the slipstream yaw effect as the prop wash spirals aft along the fuselage. This pushes on the vertical stabilizer, generating a left yawing tendency. We must counter the adverse yaw effect by applying right rudder. Once we're back on the center line, some right rudder will still be required to maintain yaw control. At this point, the rudder pedals are also pivoting the nose wheel, which is mechanically connected to the rudder pedals via a linkage mechanism. In the initial acceleration phase, a lot of the directional control is achieved by the nose wheel turning the plane. But as airspeed begins to pick up, there will be an increased airflow over the rudder, giving it more and more authority. Thus, rely less and less on the nose wheel steering for directional control. This also means we can gradually decrease the amount of rudder used to counter the slipstream yaw effect. As the airspeed now reaches 55 knots, we have arrived at the rotation segment, and we can begin a slow aft movement on the pitch control. The aircraft will pitch up slightly. This slight rotation will create a small increase in angle of attack, thus also increasing lift. As lift increases, the aircraft will lift off gently, and we have achieved flight. Note that any over-rotation, which is too much pitch up input, could cause a tail strike, and it will also prolong the takeoff roll due to it causing excessive drag.
The takeoff is an important part of any flight, which means that learning to take off accurately according to procedure will allow you to master more challenging takeoffs at a later stage. For example, in difficult crosswind situations. Let me now show you how it should be done. Here, we are lined up on the runway and we're fully ready to go. Before I do anything else, it's important to raise our eyes and look outside. Like all other maneuvers we've practiced together so far, we're going to use visual feedback to help us control the airplane, this time as it accelerates down the runway. A good aiming point on which to fix your eyes is at the far end of the runway. As we keep our eyes fixed on this spot, we gently but firmly increase our power to full. As we do, we experience the slipstream yaw effect, and I use that right rudder to maintain the aircraft on the center line. We're going to check our airspeed. As it's increasing, we're going to call airspeed live. I return my eyes outside and maintain the center line. There's 55 knots. Rotate. I gently pitch up, we lift off. Really nice.
As the aircraft becomes airborne, we are now in the initial climb segment. And entering the initial climb, we find ourselves flying at approximately 60 knots at a relatively high nose attitude. If we maintained this attitude, we would encounter two problems. First, an airspeed of 60 knots is much lower than the best rate of climb speed, Vy, which for the Cessna is 75 knots. Flying at 60 knots, we take a lot longer to reach our target altitude. And secondly, if the engine were to fail in this critical phase of flight, we'd have a very slim margin to the stalling speed of the aircraft. If we were slow to react in lowering our nose, we could stall the aircraft at a very low altitude, at worst causing an accident. Thus, it is advisable to reduce the pitch attitude as soon as possible after liftoff, so as to allow the airspeed to increase. And this acceleration is the goal of the initial climb segment. We will aim to achieve Vy 75 knots, at which point we can raise the nose back to the final climb attitude. Also, during the climb out, it is important to not allow the aircraft to drift either left or right. Our goal is to maintain the imagined extended center line of the runway, and this allows the plane to fly straight out from the runway, ensuring we do not interfere with any traffic that could be flying in close vicinity to the departure track. Once we reach 300 feet above ground, we check that the flaps are up. This is in line with the procedure published by Cessna. At 500 feet, we can perform our climb flow. This is a sequence of checklist items that we have memorized and can now check. And the climb flow consists of the following items: throttle, full, mixture, rich, engine instruments, checked. On the last item, we go through the engine instruments at the bottom left of the rightmost screen in the cockpit, checking that all of these items are within the green bands.
Let us return to the takeoff sequence, and I'll show you how to do this in the plane. As we rotate, I allow the aircraft to lift off. Once we're a few feet above the ground, I let the nose attitude reduce slightly. This is a good pitch for acceleration. We're still climbing slightly, but airspeed is increasing. There's 75 knots. We now raise the nose to the climb attitude. I trim to remove any pitch force. You will recognize the nose attitude from our lessons on climbs and descents. From here onwards, we're in the final climb segment. I will quickly check behind me to ensure we're still on the extended center line. If not, we've drifted. This could be due to wind, but more likely it is the cause I'm not countering the adverse yaw effect properly. Check your bank angle indicator to ensure the slip indicator is in the middle. Correct for any drift by banking in the direction of the center line. As we reach 300 feet, I check that my flaps are up. We continue the climb. The next target is 500 feet. As we reach 500 feet above the ground, we are at a safe altitude. We can allow ourselves to perform the climb flow now. We go to the cockpit view and start our checks. Throttle, checked at full power. Mixture, checked, full rich. Go to the zoom view quickly and check your engine instruments. They're all in the green. Climb flow complete. I return to the standard view. We continue our climb.
Just a few words on the use of checklists. A common way to perform a checklist is by the flow followed by checklist methodology. For example, in this Cessna 172, we have a checklist that looks like this. A flow is a memorized sequence of action items that we perform without looking at the checklist. For example, in the climb sequence, I would remember to check that the power is full and that the mixture is rich and that my engine instruments are green. This can be done at a relatively low altitude, such as about 500 feet. The flow is a rapid check that we can perform without pulling up a physical checklist, an action that may distract us from the challenging task of actually flying the plane at a pretty low altitude. Once we reach a higher altitude, we should still pick up the physical checklist and confirm that we have completed all our checklist items. A flow is therefore always followed by a checklist. This methodology is very similar to how airline pilots perform actions inside the cockpit, and the mix of flow and checklists ensures that we can do things not only efficiently, but also safely without the risk of forgetting important items. And in MSFS, checklists are available from an in-game panel. These are interactive checklists that replicate the real-world Cessna 172 checklists. Feel free to make use of these, though I would recommend that you use a physical checklist, as it adds both immersion and allows you to read the checklist without having to navigate an in-game panel while you're flying. Over at the Navigraph Academy website, you can find our own Cessna 172 checklist available for printing. They are in standard foldable formats and include all the procedures we'll do in this course. They also follow the real-life Cessna 172 procedures as accurately as possible.
Let us now focus on landings. A good landing begins with a good approach. To fully understand the correlation between landing success and approach stability, we must explore the behavior of the aircraft in the approach and landing segments. All approaches and landings can be divided into 3 such segments. The first is called the final approach segment, the second, the landing segment, and the last, the rollout segment. And we can begin studying the final approach segment. We arrive here when the aircraft is wings level on the extended center line of the runway with landing flaps extended. Usually at this point, the aircraft is flying at around 70 knots with flaps 30 and is descending with about 400 feet per minute. How we reach this point is something we will cover in our next lesson, which will cover traffic patterns. But for now, let us focus on what happens once we are on the final approach segment. The goal of the final approach is to follow a stable glide path, and by far the most common approach angle used is a 3-degree glide path, which can be followed by a modest vertical speed of about 400 feet per minute, flying at 70 knots. Looking at this from the perspective of the pilot, we can see that we are approaching the runway. At this point, we are flying towards our aiming point, which is located shortly before our designated touchdown point. We have to aim slightly prior to the touchdown point, as the aircraft will require some distance to reduce speed enough to achieve a touchdown. To assist us in flying an accurate final approach down towards the aiming and the touchdown points, many airports offer a visual aid called a PAPI. The PAPI consists of 4 lights that can each display either white or red lights. When we are on or very close to the 3-degree glide path, the PAPI will show 2 white and 2 red lights. If we were to descend below the path, we'd see 3 red, and if we descended further down, we would see 4 red. Moving back up, we find that the opposite is true for being too high. Seeing 3 white lights would indicate that we are slightly above, and 4 lights that we are significantly above the glide path. In order to stay on the 3-degree glide path, we must use pitch and power to counter any changes in the altitude and our airspeed. You may remember us practicing such corrections in our previous lesson on slow flight, so today we can put that knowledge to the test. For example, consider this aircraft that is on the target airspeed of 70 knots, but too high. The pilot will be seeing 3 white and 1 red light on the PAPI. The correction we are about to do must consider the fact that we are flying at our target airspeed, but that we are above the 3-degree glide path. So we must descend to regain the desired glide path while maintaining airspeed. And for a specific airspeed, vertical speed is controlled by engine power. Thus, if we want to increase our descent rate and regain our glide path, we must first reduce engine power. As we do, we must lower our nose to maintain the target airspeed of 70 knots. In return, we find that the vertical speed increases. The airplane now begins to descend back onto the glide path, and we maintain our lower pitch and power until we see a reaction on the PAPI lights. As we reach the glide path, we would once again see 2 white and 2 red lights on the PAPI. At this point, we must add power again and apply pitch corrections so that we reduce our vertical speed while we maintain 70 knots. To do this, we will reverse our previous correction. We increase power and slightly raise the nose. As you can see from this example, any correction to the glide path requires simultaneous corrections to both pitch and power. Next, let's discover how we make changes to our airspeed. As we approach the runway, we must reduce the airspeed to our final threshold speed. And for the Cessna 172, this speed is 61 knots. In order to reduce our airspeed from 70 knots to 61 knots, while maintaining a constant vertical speed, we need to increase our pitch attitude and reduce our power. So again, for any change in airspeed, we must again use simultaneous corrections to both pitch and power. As the aircraft approaches the threshold of the runway and it crosses it, we should be fully stable at 61 knots, trimmed and on the 3-degree glide path, flying towards our aiming point. This sets us up for a great landing.
That is a lot of theory, but it will become much clearer once I show you how this looks from inside the cockpit. Here we are on a long final. You can see the PAPI lights next to the touchdown markings of the runway ahead. I'm stable, 70 knots, and I've just extended flaps to full. Our pitch is stable, and we're trimmed. Looking at the runway, we can see our aiming point and our touchdown point. Being this stable, we can simply allow the aircraft to continue the approach, only countering any small wind effects if they occur. As we come close to the runway, the so-called short final, we must begin to reduce our airspeed from 70 knots to about 61 knots. To do this, we're going to reduce our power slightly. And we're going to raise the nose slightly. I trim to remove any pitch force. As you can see, the airspeed stabilizes at 61 knots. Let us move back out on the approach again, and I will show you how to correct for glide path deviations. Here we are on 4 whites. We're way too high, and we need to perform some quick corrections to get back onto the glide path. My airspeed is good, right at 70 knots. My plan is therefore to reduce our power and our pitch attitude. This ensures I maintain airspeed as our vertical speed increases. As we're quite high, I'll have to reduce power by a relatively large amount. And we're going to pitch down as much as we need to maintain our speed. Here we go. I reduce power. Let's reduce our pitch attitude as well. We're going to check our airspeed indicator. It's looking good. We're still stable at 70 knots. Had it not, I could have changed our pitch attitude to correct. As you can see, our vertical speed has significantly increased from a glide path target of around 400 feet per minute. We're getting back on the glide path. There's 3 whites, 1 red. And here's 2 whites, 2 red. Let us regain the 3-degree path and increase power and pitch up. Let's check our airspeed. That's looking good. We're going to check our vertical speed. It's about 400 feet per minute. That's great. I'm back on our glide path here. Let's return our gaze towards the aiming point. The earlier I can establish the stable glide with a stable airspeed, the better. Once we cross the threshold, we should always be stable at 61 knots, trimmed, and on the 3-degree glide path. That allows us to transition into the landing segment with an optimum precision and control, ensuring a safe, smooth touchdown.
Let us also quickly go over what we do if we are flying off the center line. That is, if you have drifted left or right of the approach path. Consider an aircraft that has deviated to the left of the extended center line of the runway. Simply aiming towards the aiming point will not do, as this would mean we'd cross the threshold and enter the landing flare at an angle that is offset from the runway's direction. Instead, we must find our way back to the extended center line at some distance before we cross the threshold. When we are back on the extended center line, the aircraft's heading can once again be aligned with the runway's direction.
This is easy to demonstrate in the plane. Here we are, quite significantly offset from the extended center line. As you can see, we must correct to the right to get back on track. I bank slightly to the right, establishing a shallow turn. To determine our position in relative to the center line, I check the apparent shape of the runway, as well as the apparent angle of the center line. Once they're almost vertical, I return to the original heading via a shallow turn in the other direction. Here we go, we're back on track.
It's time to get on the ground, so let's focus on the landing segment. This segment begins over the threshold and ends when the wheels touch the ground. The airplane crosses the threshold at 61 knots. It is important that the speed is not too high, as this would increase the landing distance considerably. But at the same time, the airspeed should never be lower than 61 knots, as this could take us very close to stalling speed. As we cross the threshold at our target airspeed, we have a descent rate of about 400 feet per minute. And this descent rate would induce a hard landing and potentially a nose wheel first touchdown attitude. Thus, the goal of this segment is to transition from the approach attitude and the high vertical speed to a touchdown attitude with a low vertical speed. And this transition is called the flare or the flare out, and it consists of slowly raising the nose, trading airspeed for a reduced vertical speed, and attaining a nose high, main wheels first touchdown attitude. As we come closer to the ground, we judge the height above the runway visually. With experience, you'll come to recognize a height that equals about half the wingspan of the aircraft. For the Cessna, this means flaring at about 15 feet or 5 meters off the ground. Focusing now on the flare transition. As we reach the flare altitude, we smoothly reduce power all the way back to idle. As we decrease the power, we begin to pitch up. As our airspeed begins to reduce, our lifting force is lessened. So in order to maintain this shallow vertical speed, we must continually increase the angle of attack. And this means continually increasing the pitch attitude as we progress through the flare. At some point, we will reach the pitch attitude for touchdown. If we did flare at the proper altitude, we would be very close to the runway in a nose-high attitude with a shallow to non-existent descent rate, very close to stalling speed. The aircraft will shortly touch down, main wheels first. Now, overviewing the whole segment, we can see that the flare has taken some distance to progress from the approach attitude for speed reduction to touchdown. The distance required for this speed reduction is the reason for the difference between our aiming point and our touchdown point, as we have discussed earlier.
Here we are on short final, flaps 30. Glide path is stable on 2 whites and 2 reds. Our airspeed is set at 61 knots. Let's keep flying towards our aiming point. I'm going to continue past the threshold, looking for the flare height by estimating it visually. Here's the flare height. The reduced power to idle, begin our flare. Our eyes are at the end of the runway now. Let's keep raising our nose. This is our touchdown attitude. Touchdown. Keep the nose up as we want to avoid smacking the nose wheel on the runway.
The last segment in our landing sequence is the ground roll. And this segment begins when the aircraft has just touched down on its main wheels, but the nose wheel is often still aloft. The goal of the ground roll is to reduce the airspeed to a slow taxi speed while maintaining the center line of the runway. To do this, the pilot must first slowly reduce the pitch attitude, as premature braking would slam the nose wheel into the ground forcefully. If a short stopping distance is desired, then as soon as the nose wheel is down on the ground, slowly but firmly apply both the left and the right brake. As you do, maintain the center line by use of the rudder input. As the airspeed reduces, larger rudder inputs may be required as the rudder continually loses aerodynamic effectiveness. As the aircraft's speed reduces to a slow taxi, prepare to exit the runway via the taxiways.
Let me show you how we land and slow down as one sequence now. We're here, just about to begin the flare. I reduce to idle and begin the flare. Again, keeping our eyes at the far end of the runway. I keep raising our nose. There's our touchdown attitude, and touchdown again. I slowly reduce the nose attitude, allowing the nose wheel to contact the runway. We begin to brake. This is a long runway, so moderate braking is enough. We're going to maintain the center line with rudder inputs. This is a good taxi speed here. I prepare to leave the runway. But what would happen if we felt the landing was unstable? For example, if we did not achieve full airspeed and glide path control as we approach the landing. In this situation, it's much better to abort the landing and attempt a go-around. A go-around can be done at any stage during the approach, but it's most challenging if we perform it from a low altitude and with full flaps. Let us demonstrate how to manage this transition. You may recall that we've earlier practiced exits from slow flight with full flaps. The go-around procedure is very similar. Here we are on the final approach. As you can see, we're too high and the PAPI is showing us all whites. It's too late to salvage this. It's a good time to go around. I smoothly apply full power. As I do, we're going to maintain level pitch by significantly pitch down pressure here. I retract the flaps to 1 notch to 20 degrees. Check our airspeed. We're going to go ahead and retract our flaps to 10 degrees and begin our climb. I aim for 75 knots and trim. As I reach 300 feet, retract flaps to 0. Again, I have to retrim. We continue our climb at 75 knots. At 500 feet, we're going to do our climb flow. Throttle's full, mixture is rich, engine instruments checked. We're all done.
And that's how we take off and land. In our next lesson, we will focus on how to fly the traffic pattern, getting us from takeoff all the way back to landing for repeated touch and go practice landings. But before we do, it's time for you to perfect your takeoff and landing techniques. And you can do this right now inside Microsoft Flight Simulator. Head over to the Academy website, where you will find even more training material, as well as an easy way to load your training lessons into Flight Simulator, which will allow you to get airborne straight away. As always, if you find our training videos entertaining and educational, feel free to subscribe or to leave a comment. That way you will be supporting our training content both now and into the future. See you up there.